Welcome, welcome.
Hey, Becky.
I've got stars in my eyes.
I know. We're going to try to play it cool, though.
Yeah, we're going to pretend like this is not the biggest deal ever, that we have such a rock star hero. And so I just want to tell everybody to buckle up, because I think we are about to have an epic conversation that is going to round out this incredible Women of Impact Week. And we are talking with one of these women in the world who is doing so much to lift up the good that women are doing across all sectors. And it's not even women that are even in business. It's women in the way that they're showing up in the world, the way that they are linking arms with each other. And I'm just here for it. So I haven't even started the intro, but I had to emote for just a second because I love it when we meet good humans and we can just amplify their good work. So it is my great pleasure to introduce Niven McCall-Mazza. She is the VP of News Platforms at a little theplace I call theSkimm. Have you ever heard of it? Yes, like millions of people get theSkimm.
Statistically, you're subscribed, friends, right?
Well, I am a subscriber. I've probably been a subscriber maybe longer than Julie, who's been a subscriber since high school. But this is an incredible platform, and it does the thing that Becky cannot do, which is it quickly curates very dense detail into a very quick soundbite. And as verbose as I am, I get so much tips from theSkimm on how to make things, palatable. And here we are with the Queen of News. And so I want to give a little bit of background.
We may need to skim this intro, let's be honest.
Yeah, we probably do need to skim it. So she is overseeing the Daily Skimm newsletter, the website, the subscription app, video, content operations. And she's been there, I think you're going on your 4th year. And the way that she has been able to scale, innovate, and diversify the company's content and products and voice has really made theSkimm a worldwide digital phenomenon. But the thing I love most about her, and I love that she has skimmed her bio, because she has incredible things that she has done in her life, but she just talks about the things that she's passionate about: female empowerment, advancing theSkimm's mission to make it easier for generations of women to live their smartest lives. She worked at NBC News before this, so she's got that journalism and ethics background, which I love and I share with you. And then to top it all off, she's on the board of Grace Farm Foods, which uses food to foster good in the world. So thanks for coming. It was a great episode. It's so good to meet you. Welcome to the We Are for Good podcast.
Hi, guys. It is so great to be here. Thank you so much for having me on. And you've had some incredible women on the show this week, so really excited to be a part of this. And I've got some, big shoes to fill and live up to as the final guest.
Well, it's going to be amazing. And I just feel like we are just standing in this really storied moment in time that we want to seize, where women are just doing extraordinary things in this world, and they're finding their voices in ways that they never have before. And I really appreciate that you're creating a platform and a news cycle to inform and advocate for them. So I'd love to just start with your career journey and what your background and what led you to not only this position, but this purpose, and is driven your passion in life. So help us connect the dots.
Yeah. So I kind of got the bug in college. I was a history major. I had done some really cool, this really great study abroad over at Oxford, and really kind of focusing on, actually European countries during the World Wars. I was also doing some internships in DC, working for a Representative Jim Himes of Connecticut, and also working for the Library of Congress, and had done also a couple stints, kind of odd jobs at some NBC Olympics, and was trying to really think about how do I mix this, interest that I have of media and history, and this is kind of embarrassing, but I was home one summer and I watched The Newsroom with Jeff Daniels, and I was like, that's it. I am going to go into news. And so I got this very low level kind of researcher job at NBC News, really paid my dues, and was able to learn quickly and move up in that very fast-paced environment that we all kind of consider those that have done it as like a crash course, like a college course of what news is. Having not gone to journalism school, which many had, it was the best training that I ever could have gotten to enter this world of journalism. And, you know, it really kind of is your training ground for what images can you show on air, and speaking to firsthand sources, whether it be police or to family members who have just lost a loved one. It's a really, really intense experience, but really taught me a lot about, you know, what is safe to, what accurate reporting is really all about, what you are good to be able to show on air, and kind of where those standards come in. And I ended up getting a job at theSkimm to be their first night editor, when they were really looking for someone who understood kind of that journalism strong background, and have been able to move up with theSkimm to now be running their news platforms. And I'm just really, really excited to be at theSkimm, really excited to be here. And that is a quick skim of my background.
And so humble too, you know, and I love that you just would share the story about the newsroom, because I think your source of inspiration can come from anywhere. And little known fact, someone on that show was I went to high school with, Lisa Munn, who I think is Olivia Munn now. That is her celebrity name. But I love that story, and I really appreciate, you know, it's hard to be a journalist right now. I mean, journalists have been under fire in the last several years. And the reality is they are working so hard to inform the public with unbiased facts. And I think that is what is the power of theSkimm, you know, and what the power of words can do. And I so appreciate the advocacy that you're bringing to the space through just sharing this information, because there's so much noise coming at us all the time, especially now in this digital world. We're all social, we're all on our phones, and it's hard to know where you can find truth. And so I just think that one of these North Stars in this sector is these journalists that are doing the hard work and raging against the storm right now. So I commend you.
Yeah, and I think media is not perfect, but I think they, as a whole, have gotten kind of a bad rap these past couple of years. And, you know, I heard this quote once, and I've shared this with others, but I was walking in the street of New York, and someone said to their friend, if I don't keep up with the news, I'm uninformed. If I do, I'm misinformed. And while I find that to be a pretty catchy line, I also strongly, strongly disagree with it, because everyone that I know that works in journalism just takes their job so seriously. And it is our responsibility to try to inform the public as best that we can. You know, there isn't some kind of mass conspiracy to spread information. And I really think that, if anything, news outlets are not spreading misinformation. So I really want to clarify that. We are talking to, you know, theSkimm curates a lot of news, but you know, NBC and ABC and CNN are really talking to firsthand sources, and sharing, you know, as best they can what they're seeing on the ground. So I think it's been tough. I think that some of the criticism is valid in terms of, I think, the bubble that media was very obviously in prior to the 2016 election. And I think a lot of media really did have to reflect and think about what's the path forward, and how are we making sure that we are sharing voices and opinions outside of just the coastal cities. But I think that is very different from spreading misinformation. And I think what theSkimm really prides itself on is how much care we put into our fact-checking process and our sourcing process, and really making sure that we are providing a nonpartisan view of what's going on in the world today, and respecting our readers and listeners and subscribers enough to let them make a decision about how they want to feel about, you know, a policy or an event. but that we have given them as much information to allow them to make an informed decision.
Yeah. And I think it's such a gift specifically because there's so much information coming at us nowadays, and there's so much happening at all times that we're aware of.
Overload.
Yeah, absolute overload. So I think that theSkimm was so ahead of its time in that you have been doing this for years and built this massive audience as a result of that. But I kind of wanted to pivot because I think that you said something that triggered in me a direction I'd love to go, is that we were kind of creeping on Niven's amazing Instagram, and she shares these, she threads her personal stories with this professional calling that I think you've just kind of explained with journalism too, of just being in the middle of that, of experiencing what everything 2020 was personally and the years before that, and trying to be on the front lines to try to help interpret that to people and to share realities with that. But a post that stuck out to me that I want to kick to you is just a tribute you did to your dad, that you said, to the man who taught us that the calmest voice in the room can be the strongest. And I think that, we're talking a lot about platform today because we've all been entrusted knowledge or facts, and it's up to us. What are we going to do with that in our own personal platforms and in the platforms of our nonprofits or whoever's listening to this podcast today? I just wonder if you'd talk a little bit about that part of your story of how you view that and how you view your personal platform in that way too.
I first want to just give a shout out to my dad. I've learned so much from him. He works at NBC Olympics, and he's someone who manages a large team and takes management very seriously. I have learned a lot about how to be a good manager from him. And in that same vein of, I think I've also learned from bad managers of, you don't have to be the loudest voice in the room. You don't have to threaten or try to elicit fear to gain respect. There are so many other ways of being a good leader. And so I really always try to be an advocate for my team. And I think I learned a lot of that watching my dad growing up over the years, and just how much loyalty his team has towards him, knowing that he has their back. And that he kind of has crossed the line of like friend and mentor and manager. And I just think that's a really important element in work, where we spend, so much of our life and so much of our time. And, I think it's the more that you can make it a welcoming, environment for people where they can share their experiences and they can have a voice and you're empowering them, I think is super important. And I think that same thing goes for theSkimm, and kind of why I was so drawn to it as a company is it is a place that wants everyone to have a voice, not only internally. I think it's really important that, we have this predominantly female team, and it's so cool to be in a room with so many strong women who are coming with fantastic ideas every day of how we can make an impact. And it's a super mission-driven company. And I think that's the thing that ties us all together, is we all are working towards this very similar goal of trying to help women. So it's very much internal, but it's also very much external. Everything that we are doing is with the goal of empowering women and getting them to really have a voice in their own life, and speak up and make decisions that are good for their wallet or good for their health. And so it definitely feels like a great place to be based on where I've, my past, and I'm very lucky that theSkimm is a place that does really prioritize that.
And I love that you draw from, what you've learned in these incredible models in your life. And, we've seen that your mom and your dad have been so instrumental in setting this tone for you. And we talk a lot just about mindsets and how leaders need to come at, wherever you are in the sector. It doesn't even have to be a nonprofit, but having this abundance mindset, having an empathy mindset is really going to help. I would almost say, like, smooth off the edges of how you're approaching business, because I think your dad is spot on. I mean, when you said you don't have to elicit fear to gain respect, it's like no one wants to follow a leader that's going to operate in that way. Because in my mind, especially in the nonprofit field, we're working toward good. We're working toward huge missions. We are trying to eradicate the world's largest problems. And we've got to come at it, from a leadership standpoint of pulling together, of linking arms, and seeing the least of us all the way to, the CEO. So love that point.
Can I add something in here too? Because Niven is too humble that she's not going to just bring this up, but I think we need to point this out, is that your ability to bring this out in your team and create this safe culture and this place where people thrive was recognized through GV, which is Google Ventures Impact List, on a global scale, right? This past year. So you're on this top impactor list. So I think she's playing very humble ball with us right here, but she knows how to do this. She knows how to bring out this integrity and meaningful connections within teams, and she's been recognized for it. So just saying that.
No shock there.
I was definitely not going to bring that up, but thank you.
I guess that would have been awkward. But
and I'll say, I mean, I'm very humbled and very appreciative to have gotten that recognition. I would say, this all started so long before me. So much credit goes to Carly Zakin and Danielle Weisberg for creating such an incredible company. And I think it's a company where they really do empower women. And so I have been lucky and fortunate to have benefited from that. And I also think that one of their strengths is also really curating, we curate information, but we also curate a team that is so incredible. And so, a lot of what I may be getting recognized for is really just a reflection of how incredible this team is and the work they do every single day.
Yeah, and I love the value structures of the Skimm, and when you have those really solid values that everyone can glom onto, I mean, every good thing is going to flow down from the content to the culture and all of that. So I want to pivot a little bit and just talk about the Skimm. We may have some listeners who are not familiar with the Skimm, and I would love for you to give them an overview of how you're empowering and serving. I don't know if it's just millennial women, because I'm a Gen Xer and I feel empowered by it. So yeah, give us a little bit of background on it.
Yeah, so the Skimm is a mission-driven digital media company. We are most well known for our flagship product, the Daily Skimm newsletter, which goes out to 7 million millennial women daily. Obviously, that's not just millennial women, but we do have a large millennial women audience that we speak to. And we also speak to millions of others through our entire product suite, which includes a subscription app. It includes a career podcast, a news podcast, and 2 other newsletters, one that's focused on money and one that's focused on recommendations for products and entertainment, reads, all of that. We started as a newsletter business. Carly and Danielle they were producers at NBC. And they really felt like, the Today Show and nightly news just wasn't speaking to their generation and the audience and people that they speak to all the time. And so they created something themselves that they thought would be a more effective way of informing this generation. And it obviously has worked, and it's
a verb now, so it's like when you're a verb, you've arrived.
And so they've really built this, I'll call it an empire. I will, and say they've built this team and this empire and this business, and we've gone from trying to help women understand the news in the morning. And really the purpose of that is, how can you have informed conversations throughout the course of the day? If something comes up at work, making sure that you have the background to be able to speak to that in a meeting is super important. If something comes up at the dinner table, making sure that you're having informed conversations with your, personal network, and making sure that extends all the way through now when you vote, in either your local elections, your presidential elections, whatever that is, we really want to make sure that we've built that foundation over the course of however many years that we have you as a reader, that you have the information and feel equipped to make an informed decision at the polls. And so I think it's really, it started there, and it's grown into, we've been able to kind of have this impact with news, and how do we have that same impact in so many other areas of life. And we've moved into money and trying to help women make smarter financial decisions. Equal pay days this week, we have seen that women are still making around 82 cents for every dollar that men are making. And that's, even more egregious when you break it down by Black women and Hispanic women, and Asian women and Native American women. And so it's to make sure, there's a large part of that is a complete society problem. That's a huge problem that needs to be solved. But for the part that women do have control over, which is when they go into a negotiation with their boss, or when they are, at the stage of interviewing for a job, how can we equip them in the best way that we can, so that they are getting what they need? So that's, we've got the money element, then we're going into health, and have really launched that kind of in tandem with the needs that we were seeing happening last year, with this pandemic that we are all still living through, and understanding that there's so much of your health that is also incredibly complicated. And so much of this stuff we just don't learn in school, like how to manage your health insurance and how to do your taxes. And
thank you.
And all of these things that are so relevant to actually being able to live a smart life. But, I'm not going to say anything bad about the type of things that we learn in school, but there does seem to be a real lack of kind of these foundational things that I think are so important. And theSkimm is really trying to make sure that as many women have access to that information.
Okay, I just want to give an endorsement of theSkimm, because even as you're saying all of this, I want to give some context to it, because, we talk so much about, having a voice and creating. What is your voice as an organization, as a human being? When you're on social or in digital platforms, what is your voice? And theSkimm, to me, was one of the first media outlets I felt like seemed like a person. They seem like they had a soul. It feels like a girlfriend, like you're having coffee with your girlfriend and she's telling you what's going on. And I love that you brought up equal pay, because I think, as we're discussing Women of Impact Week, I was reading an article today about it, and it's just so shocking. And I think people, when they hear about equal pay, they're just like, yeah, women are not making enough, but we're not digging into the why of that. And it's like, if you look at, like, we had somebody on a couple of weeks ago, and we were talking about the amount of unemployment that happened in December was 100%, 145,000 women lost their jobs. And I thought the stat was wrong, because I thought surely there's a man in there that was seeking unemployment. It was 145,000 women who lost their job in December, or left their job because of, the pressures of taking care of children, of needing to be at home during COVID. And that shrinks the pay gap for all of us when these women are leaving the sector, and they're leaving the sector on the lowest end. And so we've got to figure out a way, and this is why I'm like trying to empower people. We've got to be advocates for them. When these women come into our workspace, we've got to be kind and gracious about making sure that they have balance, and making sure that they have promotional opportunities, and that we're creating pathways for success, that we're checking in often. This is a really difficult time right now, and I just really appreciate how you're lifting that conversation up and finding a way for people to pour into it.
That December jobs report stat, I will say, I also thought was wrong. And we, our team as fact checkers, like, we dug in there and said, how could this be possible? There were men that lost their jobs in December as well. I do want to be clear about that.
There they are.
But I think what was so astounding is that the amount of women that lost their jobs were like double, I think, how the number of men that lost their jobs. And therefore the net loss came out to, I think it was the 145,000 stat that you mentioned. Now I'm sure my team would fact check me on all those, but
they're dying on the vine with what I said.
Right?
Yeah.
We'll put ish.
I think the key thing there really comes down to the fact that our society is not equipped to support working moms. And we still as a country don't have a federally mandated family leave policy. And there's so much action that needs to be done when it comes to that. And I think this pandemic has shown a spotlight on how we are far from equality when it comes to protecting women. We could talk about that when it comes to domestic violence. We could talk about that when it comes to, women feeling safe walking home from work. But also, really just, are they protected in the workplace? And how are we thinking about having two parents that work? And have we changed our kind of system of work since, let's just say the 1940s and the 1950s? And now that we have so many women who are really, leading the charge when it comes to graduation rates and working and being leaders at companies, I don't think that our family leave policies have really caught up with that. And that's something that needs to, I think, change yesterday, years ago.
Decades ago.
And, it's tough to be on Zoom and see so many of my incredible coworkers juggling, trying to teach their kids, trying to, engage their kids, leading these meetings. I respected them before, but my respect level now is through the roof. And I just have no idea how, everyone is doing it. And I recognize that I'm in a very different situation without having kids living through this pandemic. And I just can't imagine, the immense amount of additional pressure that it's adding on so many women across the country.
Well, I love that conversation because just like theSkimm, you're leading us toward action, toward informed understanding of facts, and how does that drive to what do we need to do? And I think a lot of our listeners, we're connected to causes, we're organizations, we exist because we're trying to perpetuate something or eradicate something. And there's such a beautiful, diverse audience that listens to this podcast. And I know that you know at such a deep level the power of storytelling and how it can expose inequalities, how it can challenge systemic issues like racism, and also just build communities as well. And I wonder if you could kind of you could either share a story or maybe a great example of how you've seen this partnership of using story to lift a cause, and how we can kind of inspire our nonprofits to use that to their advantage to really get our messages out.
Yeah, I think storytelling comes with a lot of responsibility. I think that we have witnessed these past couple of years that people still really do live in bubbles across the country. And there are times that whatever publication or whatever nonprofit, whatever it is that they're experiencing, might be I would doubt it's the first time, but might be one of the few times that they may really get to see someone of a different community and kind of hear their story. And so, I think we all have a responsibility to really, as storytellers, be thinking about what stories are we sharing and how are we highlighting really the power of all of these communities and kind of the leadership and what makes them so unique. But also on the flip side, we have the responsibility to also make sure that we are laying bare the inequalities and inequities that they still face, and are really trying to make everyone aware that we as citizens of the US are responsible ourselves for correcting a lot of these issues. And there's a lot that the government should be doing, but there's also a lot that we all should be doing in our personal life to be anti-racist and to make sure that we are calling out injustice when we see it in our, in our homes, in conversation with our families, in our workplace, making sure that we have really diversity in hiring and diversity in making sure we have an inclusive workplace, that we're calling it out if we see someone say something that's offensive and racist at the post office, let's just say, and I think making sure that basically we are helping everyone to realize that we all have this responsibility, and that we are equipping our audience to let them know, like, this is your responsibility and this is how you can take action. These are the resources that you can go to understand more, to donate your time or donate your money. These are how you have uncomfortable conversations with even your own family members about race. So it's incredibly important, and something that I think theSkimm has really tried to take on as best we can. I think this is such a large scale reckoning that this country needs to have. And I think theSkimm is really trying to make sure that we are equipping our audience in the best way that we can, to be very aware and very active in their daily lives of how to stand up and be anti-racist.
And back to, you don't have to be the loudest voice in the room to get that point across. And I think that is the real opportunity here, because if there's anything that I have felt emboldened by this year, it is that we cannot even stay silent. That staying silent is one of the pitfalls of creating this environment in this world that we're living in. And it is incumbent upon us to bravely and kindly step out and check people. We need to amplify our voices. We need to dig into our core. And part of that comes with just feeling like you know what's going on, being informed, knowing where the resources are. That can completely disarm a conversation immediately. So I wanted to talk a little bit about how you build advocacy within community, because I think you all do this so well. And we had talked earlier this week with Dr. Tyrone Freeman, as he was sharing the story of Madam C.J. Walker and one of the groundbreaking African-American philanthropists in the early 1900s. And he is informing us and telling us that philanthropy is not just about giving. It's also about activating, and it's about volunteering, and it's about getting involved and finding a way that you can pour whatever your gift is into something else. theSkimm does an amazing job of this. So what kind of advice would you give to our nonprofit community about building advocacy within their own sphere?
I think you hit the nail on the head when it comes to providing resources. I think, everyone has a different capacity for what they can give, whether that be money, whether that be time, whether that be challenging their inner circle, determining whether their inner circle is really, acting in accordance to the way that they want to live their own life. And I think, we try to not assume what our audience is capable of providing in any given moment, while also recognizing that, this is a journey and everyone is on a different stage of that journey. And so it's trying to make sure that you are providing everyone, no matter what stage they are on, a certain level of resources for how they can take action. And I think the other element of it is making sure that you are being authentic. So making sure that you are not asking more of your audience or more of whoever you are speaking to, the donors, constituents, whoever it is, than you are willing to do yourself. And so it's also, I think, really putting in the work. And, theSkimm, I think, is doing that in a great way with a program called Skimm Elevate, which is making sure that we are supporting and highlighting BIPOC businesses. And I think a lot of it has to do with how are you behind the scenes being very intentional, and and making sure that, you know, you are putting in the same work that you are asking others to do, because people are smart. They're going to read through anything that doesn't come off as, you know, well, why are they asking me when they're not going to do anything themselves? So I think it's important that the message comes off as authentic. You know, it's been a year. I am a half Black woman, and it has definitely been a lot to process on a personal level, while also trying on a professional level to make sure that we are helping our audience, you know, really understand and, you know, spread the stories of inequity and racism that we're seeing. But on a personal level, I am, I'll say, hopeful. I think the amount of conversations that I've had with people lately, I'm glad at least that some of this stuff has risen to the surface. And I think that there was a lot of, I don't want to say people were blind, but I think, you know, there was a lot of, oh, it's not really happening here anymore. You know, and I'm hopeful that by addressing these things in a very explicit, out there way, you know, even if that only changes 5% of the population, that's a start. And so I would just say, you know, keep going, have your conversations with people in Oklahoma. Like, you have the power to make that change. We've seen that firsthand, how much, you know, we all hold that power. And it really does start local.
And if you impact 5%, that 5% can impact, I mean, ripple, and that's what I think you need to start a movement.
Some people have a mailing list of 7 or 8 million, whatever you said at theSkimm. And some of this, we all have people that listen to us and look up to us in some way. And so thank you for that. I really appreciate that. So we're rounding out Women of Impact Week. And I'm wondering, who's a woman that you admire, or who's shaped you into who you are today?
Well, I'm glad you asked, because I love my dad, but I want to make sure that my mom gets
I was feeling that right after I said it. I'm like, let's give mom some love.
Because, yeah, she really is I'd call her kind of the fire of our family. She is a very, very strong woman, and has always really pushed me to be a feminist, to have a voice. You know, okay, I'm having a bad day. What am I going to do about it? You know, she's always the person that I turn to for so many things, but she is just this incredible source of strength. And she herself, as a Black woman who grew up in a time where these conversations weren't being had, and racism was more explicit, you know, she's gone through a lot. And I think that she is just this pillar of, she's an incredibly radiant, strong woman, and has shown me kind of the path to lead. And I'll say, just to give an example, my best friend's mom took, you know, my mom and my best friend's mom took us to so many, I remember just going to so many like women's forums and panels when we were kids. And we met one time Mary Robinson, who was the first female president of Ireland. And I just remember being like, oh my gosh, I'm going to be president one day. And my best friend and I kind of came out of that, and we started this, we started this club at our high school, and we had to like petition to the principal that we wanted to start this club. And it was called POWER, Project of Women's Essential Rights. And we wanted to create this small group. I mean, it happened to be small. We weren't hoping it would be small, but it was a small group of women in our high school who were really, who wanted, you know, really to embrace feminism and the advancement of women. And so my point of all this is that this all started very young. It started with my mom bringing me to these panels, showing me how women can rise. and that I'm, you know, such an invaluable thing to have understood at such a young age that, you know, I can do anything. I can be president of Ireland.
You may have to immigrate first, but yes.
I was just thinking we need to have Mama McCall on the podcast. She could like come in here and teach us how do you, I mean, because I sense that you have just so, you love yourself. She's taught you to be confident. She's taught you that you are important and unique and special. And it just shows that if you can start early with empowering a young girl in that way, she can rise to be the VP of News at theSkimm. Holy smokes. I mean, I may be nerdy, but I think that's cooler than the president of Ireland. So, I'm really curious if we asked all our guests just about a moment of philanthropy that maybe just deeply moved you and stuck with you. Do you have one that is personal to you?
Yeah, and I think it kind of goes back to, you know, being shaped at a young age. So I wasn't really that young. I was ninth grade, but went on a couple of service projects. So Appalachia Service Project is what it was called. And it was in partnership with a church in town. And it's this kind of months long, I think, experience where you are learning how to do kind of building techniques before you go and you are helping people in Appalachia who are less fortunate than you repair their homes. And they really, I mean, it was such an important experience for me of really getting to know people outside of where I lived and recognizing that, you know, I was very fortunate to grow up in this small town in Connecticut where I didn't have to worry about having food on my table at dinner, or if it was raining, is there a leak in the ceiling? And really just opened my eyes to how privileged I was, and that there is so much work to be done domestically. And I think, you know, a lot of times I feel like when people, especially I think when I was growing up, maybe this is just my own ignorance, but I think there's a lot of like, oh, I'm going to donate to this cause abroad. And, you know, there's a lot going on that internationally that the US can be leading the charge in. And I think all of that is true, but there is also a lot to be done in the communities here. And so I think it was really eye-opening experience for me of, you know, checking my own privilege and really understanding the level of work that needed to be done in the US, and also, again, kind of the stories that need to be told and how we can help these communities, and what effect we all can have to make change.
I love that.
That's beautiful. Goodness, thank you for sharing that. Okay, we're kind of coming into the end of our interview, although we don't want this to end, but would you share one good thing? We ask all of our guests a piece of advice or something that you could implement today. This is our most skim question on our list.
It really is our most skim question.
Skim it down to one. What's your one good thing?
I would say the one good thing I would recommend is really just asking others how you can help and pausing and listening to their response. I think that we have a tendency to go through our lives. We're all super busy and kind of understand or think we understand what other people are going through. And I think we are going through a time where we are all dealing with this pandemic and stress and everything that's being asked of us in very different ways. And we don't know how everyone is dealing with it. And so I think, trying to check in and trying to really listen as best we can to what other people are needing is, I found to be, you know, as much as we can do sometimes, is just being an ear to listen. And through that, you know, you might find a way to be able to help others.
And that right there is the essence of our dear friend, our new friend here, because I mean, I love that you as a journalist are just encouraging others to just listen and kind of extend their hand and move through life in a way that is heartfelt and genuine, because that is how we can upend, generations of hate and derision and those kinds of things. It's really about listening and finding a way that you can pour yourself into someone else, because I think that has such a cyclical effect that once you do that, it's just going to keep compounding upon itself. And that's something that everybody can do. How can listeners connect with you, with theSkimm? We've already given a massive shout out to your Instagram. Only go there if your heart and your mind are centered, because it made me a little weepy, because your writing is just so great. And I love the way you humanize yourself, and I can tell who the important people are in your life and the important values that you have. And it's just a wonderful platform. But how could somebody connect with you and theSkimm?
You can sign up at theskimm.com for any of our newsletters. I highly recommend them. They are free. The Daily Skimm comes to your inbox every morning. Our other two are weekly newsletters, but I promise that you will get something out of them. You can also connect with us 24/7 on our Instagram, which is at theSkimm. And I appreciate my own personal Instagram love that you guys have been giving me. I've been trying to share more, so I appreciate that it's not gone unnoticed. But I am at the Curvator, which who knows why I have that handle. It doesn't really make sense. But
I hope you bought the URL. Yeah.
I should probably change
Create a brand. Do it.
I really appreciate you guys having me on and allowing me to speak to a lot of issues that theSkimm is trying to do. And I also just want to say how impressed I am that you guys have started this podcast and have focused on how to bring good to the world, because I know that it's not easy and the world definitely feels a bit dark right now. So to have a space and to have had this time to really be able to speak about how we can affect change and affect good is such a rare thing. So thank you for bringing so much light to your listeners.
As dark as the time is, I feel like everyone's looking for hope and a way that they can pour into bringing our light back. And so thank you for that. And I want to give a challenge to everybody right now. If you can do one good thing, maybe this is my one good thing, please forward theSkimm to an important woman in your life and an important man in your life. I mean, we have talked so much about this being a platform for women, but we've also discussed this week the importance of male allyship, and to even have the important men in our life understand the issues that they're facing and how they can pour into it is really going to make this grassroots movement grow even further. So appreciate you. Love your heart. Thank you for sharing with us. Hope our paths cross again.
This has been amazing. Thank you.
Thank you both.